All right, welcome back. I'm joined right now live with Albany City Commissioner Roger Marietta. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Romney.
Well, let's get right to it. A lot of people kind of want to review the results of the recent election, and we had a couple things that people were surprised at. Some people were not surprised at. Let's start with state court judge. Victoria Darasaw won with 60% of the vote. Tell me a little bit about the impact of a state court judge and what exactly they do, because a lot of people still weren't quite sure.
Well, she won. It was a fairly competitive race. She outraised her opponent. She also was first on the ballot, and some little things like that do add up. And they were both good people, and I think she won a very spirited race there. The state court judge handles misdemeanor cases in the area. So the felonies go to the Superior Court, and the state court judge handles the misdemeanors.
So she'll be busy.
I think there's quite a few misdemeanors in Albany, unfortunately.
Let's move on. Another very close race and very highly contested race. Incumbent coroner Emma Quimbley was defeated by Michael Fowler, and he won with 52% of the vote. That is extremely close. Now, we know that not everyone came out, and not everyone who's registered came out to vote, and so, thousands of people didn't vote. That could have swayed it either way. Talk to me about the importance, number one, of coming out to vote if you're registered,
right,
and then the coroner race because it was so close.
Right, and it's always important to vote, and your vote does count, and that was a very, very tight race. Incumbent has the advantage. I think Michael Fowler probably outworked and outspent the incumbent. And again, money was an issue in that race, I think. But I think, when people say, my vote doesn't count, they're really doing it to themselves, because if they don't vote, then it doesn't count. But I think you're absolutely right that the more people vote, the more competitive these races are. And in a primary, though, we usually have a lower turnout. In the general election, I think there'll be more people turning out for the general election. That's usually the highest turnout when the presidential race comes into play.
Absolutely. So we know that in November, we're going to be expecting a lot more people to come to the polls. We still probably won't see every single registered voter. However, why is it that so many drastically more people come out for a presidential election compared to a primary?
Well, the average person just feels like the presidential race is more important than the coroner's race, A lot of people don't know that the coroner, if the sheriff gets indicted or arrested, the coroner takes over. So there's a lot of importance to the coroner's race, actually. But the presidential race is so apparent to everybody why it's important. It's in the news. It's in everybody's mind. And I think it's not as going to be a tight race in Georgia, but I think people will still make a good effort to get out and vote for that.
Absolutely. Now, we do know that when it's time to vote, polls, they try to be accommodating 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Some people still say my vote doesn't count. We all know that it does. Question for you. Is there still time for someone to register to vote if they wish to vote in the November election?
Oh, certainly. Certainly. There's a 30-day closing period to register. So you can register online or down at the Board of Elections within that, as long as that application is postmarked 30 days ahead. And a lot of people don't know, you can call right now down to the Board of Elections, 431-3247, and request an application for an absentee ballot. And so there's a lot of controversy about identification and everything, but if you're already registered to vote and you don't have an ID, you can call down and get an absentee ballot sent to your house
and still be counted.
And you still get your vote count. So we have early voting, absentee balloting. So there's a lot of ways to get people out to vote, and I think what I encourage people to do is vote early. That's what I've been doing, is maybe voting 2 or 3 weeks early.
Get it out the way.
And yeah, I think that makes way for more people to vote too, because on election day, early in the morning and late in the evening, it gets kind of crowded, and if we can keep those lines down by early voting, then I think that'll maximize turnout as well.
All right, sounds good. Well, we have a lot more coming out with Mr. Marietta right after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are here for part 2 of our live interview with Albany City Commissioner Roger Marietta, and we're talking about the election results. We have to discuss the one that was probably the most talked about, the most debated about, the hottest one, the Dougherty County School Board at-large seat. Incumbent Anita Williams-Brown lost her seat to Dr. Lane Price. Talk to me about why some were shocked, some were not shocked, and that was just a really hot race. Tell me about why it was so contested.
Well, there's a couple factors in there. Obviously an incumbent usually has the advantage But if there's controversy, that can work the other way. And of course, Price raised a lot of money. I mean, I don't know if that's a record for a school board seat, but she raised and spent $71,000, which is significant. So I think there was a couple things. Again, we've talked about how money comes into play in a lot of these races, and you can see it again in this race, and also the fact that there was a lot of controversy revolving around the school board, and it was a county-wide election, and the people, you know, I think one old-timer told me a long time ago when I first got into politics, people don't get out to vote for you, but they will get out to vote against you. And I think this is a classic case where a lot of people just voted against the incumbent school board member. That was really the only incumbent that was on the ballot that had any opposition, because people are being deluged with negative information about the school board. And I think that was kind of a reaction to that.
Absolutely. So we're certainly going to be talking more about that because we're sure it's not over yet. Another thing we have to hit on, one of the other main issues, was T-Splost. We know that it was divided up into 12 regions in the state of Georgia. 3 passed, however, that does not include our immediate viewing area. So knowing that we voted not to get that extra 1-cent sales tax that would go directly toward transportation projects, what does that mean for our transportation system now? And I want you to get on your high horse because as a commissioner, this affects some things that you guys do.
Well, it does. We have the regular SPLOST that passed a few years ago that does some things for roads and alleys and things like that. And we also have the DOT local road improvement program that's ongoing. So this didn't alleviate all the things that were in place already. And certainly the city could have used the money. However, I think the bigger issue came into play was the inequity of sales tax. There were a lot of people, and you had kind of the perfect storm here where you had the Tea Party come up and they were against it, even though it was the Republicans in the General Assembly that put it forward. And then you had a lot of people in the poor end of the section, you know, of the income strata who basically were against it because they don't use the roads. They walk or ride the buses. And so you had kind of the perfect storm coming together on this T-Splost idea. And I think people were just suspicious by the amount of advertising that the Georgia Chamber spent.
Right.
You know, it was like, who's paying for the ads? Who's going to benefit from this? And you really didn't know.
But all in all, local projects, some still will go on because they were already built in. However, certain ones that were on our wish list, let's say, are going to be on hold for right now until we can figure out other means to fund them, correct?
That's true. And can I elaborate on that a little bit?
In about 20 seconds, sure. Then we got to wrap up. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say some individual projects like the Westover cut through, there were neighborhoods in Lee County that were against it and people in Albany that were against it. So there were individual projects on that list that stirred up a lot of opposition, including the Clark Avenue Extension Bridge and some of the other smaller projects.
Well, we certainly appreciate having your commentary on the various issues that we just voted on. Certainly thank you for joining us live on air. And now we're going to throw it over to Chief Meteorologist Mike Morrison with